Will the U.S. bishops discuss Eucharistic coherence at their spring meeting in June? Bishop THOMAS PAPROCKI of Springfield tells us why he believes they should. And the papal posse, Robert Royal and Father GERALD MURRAY, are here with in-depth analysis of this story and all the big news of the week. And Catholic investor Jimmy Dunn talks about faith in times of crisis and the amazing commencement address he recently delivered at his alma mater, Notre Dame. Finally, Dennis Quaid joins us with a preview of his new family film on Netflix, Blue Miracle. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. What a show we have for you tonight. If you'd like to comment, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover this evening. Before I'm joined by Robert Royal and Father GERALD MURRAY, some news. Earlier this week, it was reported that a group of 60 bishops, led by Cardinal Wilton Gregory, wrote to Archbishop Jose Gomez, pressing him to suspend the Eucharistic Coherence discussion ahead of the Catholic bishops' June meeting. This discussion is merely to discuss whether the bishops would draft a document on the reception of communion and whether public figures who defy church teaching should be receiving the Eucharist. Joining me now to share his insights on the matter and tell us why he supports that discussion is the shepherd of the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, Bishop THOMAS PAPROCKI. Your Excellency, thank you for being here. In that letter signed by 67 bishops or so, they are requesting that Archbishop Jose Gomez suspend the aforementioned discussion. They write, having now received the May 7th, 2021 letter from His Eminence Luis F. Cardinal Ladaria, Prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, we respectfully urge that all conference-wide discussion and committee work on the topic of Eucharistic worthiness and other issues raised by the Holy See be postponed until the full body of bishops is able to meet in person. The high standard of consensus among ourselves and of maintaining unity with the Holy See and the Universal Church, as set forth by Cardinal Ladaria, is far from being achieved in the present moment. Moreover, as the Prefect's sound theological and pastoral advice opens a new path for moving forward, we should take this opportunity to re-envision the best collegial structure for achieving that. Bishop PAPROCKI, what did you think when you first heard about this letter?
Well, it's rather puzzling because Cardinal Ladaria calls for a two-step process. First, there should be dialogue among the bishops, and then secondly, dialogue with politicians. And actually, that's been going on for some time. This goes back at least to 2004, when John Kerry was running for president, a Catholic running for president, and we had quite a bit of discussion then. And over the years, there have been actually quite a bit of conversation going on with politicians. But it's also puzzling because the letter from the 60 or so bishops to Archbishop Gomez calls for a total suspension of all committee work on this. And that would seem to be exactly counter to what the idea is of having some dialogue. So the proposal at this point is simply to have a vote at our June meeting whether or not to be drafting a document on Eucharistic coherence, and then have a discussion in November when the full body of bishops is present in person. So I understand the goal there. It's very important that when we have that final debate and amendment process and vote, that should be in person, and that's what's planned for November. But in order to have a document for us to look at, the committee work has to continue. And so we need to push forward with this in June.
You and many of your fellow bishops, including Archbishop Cordileone of San Francisco, Archbishop Aquila of Denver, Archbishop Naumann of Kentucky, have been critical of bishops who've tried to derail this discussion by working the back channels in Rome. In a statement on Wednesday, you wrote, "Sadly, there are some bishops and cardinals of the Church who not only are willing to give Holy Communion to pro-abortion politicians, but who seek to block the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops from addressing the question of Eucharistic coherence." Why do you think are some bishops looking to stop this discussion?
Well, because I think they just don't want to face this issue, which is actually something that is very long-standing in our tradition. It goes back to the early church. In fact, St. Paul wrote in his first letter to the Corinthians that whoever eats unworthily of the bread and drinks from the Lord's cup makes himself guilty of profaning the body and the blood of the Lord. And we understand that to mean that if you receive Holy Communion in the state of mortal sin, you're actually committing another mortal sin. You're committing the sin of sacrilege. And so it's not like we're making something up here that's new, nor are we simply being legalistic with it. This is a longstanding tradition of the church, and emphasizing the importance of what it means to be properly disposed to receive Holy Communion.
Incidentally, none of the bishops or cardinals, Tobin, Supich, Gregory, O'Malley, none of them who signed that letter put out statements. And the letter to Archbishop Gomez was not made public. It was leaked. Even if all the bishops were to agree that a pro-abortion politician could not receive communion, they can't compel another bishop to deny communion to anybody. So why has this become such a polarizing issue for some bishops to even discuss at a meeting with other bishops?
Well, there are some who would want to say that the only ones who have any say on this matter are the bishops of where a person has a domicile. So, for example, currently that would be the Archbishop of Washington, because the president lives in the White House. But the fact is that President Biden is traveling around the country, I would think, going to communion in different churches and different dioceses. It does pertain to the bishop of that diocese to make a determination about whether or not Holy Communion should be given. So it does pertain to every bishop. It would be certainly be very helpful if we had a consensus on this around the country. This is not really, I would argue, this is not an optional matter. It's not a question of discretion of whether or not we want to do this. I think canon law is clear on this, and again, I think church teaching is clear on this. It's based on biblical teaching. So this is not something that's being done arbitrarily, but I think it's being true to our tradition of what it means to be properly disposed to receive Holy Communion. And the idea of Eucharistic coherence also goes back to, that's actually a phrase that came out of Latin America in a document in 2007 by the bishops of Latin America, where they said that, addressing this to legislators, heads of government, and health professionals, they said that we must adhere to a Eucharistic coherence. That is, be conscious that they cannot receive Holy Communion and at the same time act with deeds or words against the commandments, particularly when abortion, euthanasia, and other grave crimes against life and the family are encouraged. And I would also note that that document, at the time it was passed, included Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He was a major architect of that document and often speaks of it as guiding his pastoral ministry. So I would assume, that being the case, that certainly Pope Francis would want us to adhere to Eucharistic coherence, and that's why we need to address that issue in our country.
Yeah, that Parasida document that you referenced there, he was a Cardinal Bergoglio, and now Pope Francis was instrumental in shaping that document. You're right, he constantly mentions it as almost a guidepost throughout his pontificate he has. The USCCB President, Jose Gomez, has not taken the topic of Eucharistic coherence off the agenda for the upcoming meeting. What do you expect to come out of this discussion next month?
What I expect to come out of this discussion is that we will get approval to move forward for the committees to continue to work. The Committee on Doctrine will be actually drafting a document with consultation with other committees, for example, the Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance, of which I am a member, and that they will then have a draft. And when that draft is proposed, then that would be the basis for further consultation. We always have a process where any bishop can submit amendments to a draft, and then there's a debate on the draft and a final vote, and that won't happen until November. So I think for this process to go forward, I would also add that I think it's very important that we talk about this issue, not only in terms of communion for politicians. Certainly the election of President Biden, a Catholic who is pro-abortion, has given urgency to this issue. But we also know that polls tell us that apparently 70% or so Catholics don't believe in the real presence, or at least don't understand the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. We also see occasions where Catholics who are divorced and remarried without an annulment are going to communion or they're cohabiting. So there are other situations besides that of politicians. And so, and the document, I understand, will address not just the question of Holy Communion for politicians who are pro-abortion, but I think the whole idea of Eucharistic coherence applies to everybody, that there should be a coherence. In other words, that there should be consistency between our beliefs and the way we live our lives.
Bishop Paprocki, thank you for the insight. We will, of course, be watching in the days ahead to see how this conversation proceeds. Thank you for being here. And here with in-depth analysis of all of this and much more is the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org and St. John Henry Newman visiting chair at Thomas More College, Robert Royal, and from Manhattan, canon lawyer, priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father GERALD MURRAY. Gents, thanks for being here. I want to get your reaction to the 60-plus bishops and the cardinals trying to stymie a bishop's discussion on Eucharistic coherence. What did you think of what Bishop Paprocki just said? Father Jerry.
Bishop Paprocki was right on target. It's really shocking that Cardinal Gregory and others would try to shut down a discussion just after Cardinal Ladaria from Rome gave guidelines on how to conduct that discussion. And it should be noted that those guidelines were a rather unusual intervention of the Congregation of Doctrine of the Faith in discussion of an issue that really hasn't even been discussed yet. So the idea that you wouldn't want to talk about things that are of vital importance for the bishops and the people of the United States, very troubling. And I thought Bishop Paprocki put it very well. This is not something that is new. We've known about this problem of prominent Catholics who support abortion and yet continue to receive Holy Communion. It goes way back, and it should be dealt with forthrightly. And as he also said, it's not an optional matter. Canon law regulates this. Theology teaches the truth. So I'm glad to hear that he and hopefully most bishops will support going on with the discussion.
Bob, your thoughts. And Father Jerry really struck a point with me. The bishops are all too eager to discuss climate change statements and racism statements and, all these kind of, though important, tertiary concerns to bishops. This runs to the very heart and soul of what it means to be Catholic and their job.
Yeah, for me, it's quite curious that we have a regular structure in the USCCB that establishes these schedules, the way that they're going to put an agenda together to talk about certain issues. And, many things go onto the agenda and some go forward and some don't. The way that this group, and we know that Cardinal Cupich and I think Tobin were over in Rome, seeking to kind of put a block on even this very preliminary discussion of a key issue. It goes outside the regular procedures of what our American bishops have established themselves. There's no problem going to this meeting and saying, I don't like the way this is going. I think we ought to consider something else. But the very fact that they place so much importance on not even beginning a discussion, to me, says that there's something quite wrong here. And we know, no disrespect to Cardinal Cupich, for example, but we know that Cardinal Cupich has been nominated for various high posts in the USCCB. His fellow bishops have not elected him to those positions. And so instead, he's seeking to influence our U.S. bishops by going to Rome and asking Rome to intervene in a papacy that likes to pride itself on seeking to decentralize what is going on in the church, to give a little bit more autonomy where that autonomy ought to exist in other places besides Rome. So to me, this is quite puzzling. And I think of it, I know there are many differences between these two things, but I think of it in a way like the accord that the Vatican has signed with China. We know what China got out of that. We don't know what the church got out of it. What do our bishops get out of this protection of democratic politicians and now a president who's a Catholic Democrat? What do they get? What does the church benefit from by entering into this kind of so-called dialogue with them? We know that this dialogue is not going to go anywhere on the key issues like abortion. What advantage is there to the church? What advantage is there to the evangelization of the truth that Christ asks us to proclaim? It's very, very puzzling.
I want to move on to the Pope's homily on the Feast of Pentecost, where the Pope called on the Church to reject ideologies of the left and the right. He said, if we listen to the Spirit, we are not to be concerned with conservatives and progressives, traditionalists and innovators, right and left. The Paraclete impels us to unity, to concord, to the harmony of diversity. The enemy wants diversity to become opposition, and so he makes them become ideologies. Say no to ideologies, yes to the whole. What do you make of that? And who do you think the Pope was speaking to here, Father Jerry?
Well, this language that the Pope uses is largely imposing a political set of categories on religious doctrine. And I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's the wrong analogy to use. Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The sacred scriptures record the revelation of God, and in the Gospels tell us exactly what Jesus taught. And one of the things he taught was that to the apostles, he who hears you hears me. So the apostles have a solemn role to teach what Jesus taught and then to proclaim that teaching down the generations. That teaching is clear. That teaching has been developed and explained and explicated by the popes and the councils over the centuries. So it's not as if we have different versions of the truth. There's one truth, and those that support it, we could definitely say they're conservative because they're trying to conserve what was given by Christ to the apostles handed down to us. To make the categories simply, well, innovators, those who want to protect the past, reject both of them. No, those who protect the teaching of the Church are the ones who are upholding with the virtue, we could say, of fortitude, going against worldliness, because remember, we don't exist in a bubble. Left-wing ideology has as one of its main categories the destruction of Christian truth, because it's an obstacle to the accomplishment of their goals. Just look at it for two cases. Abortion, left-wing ideology says there's no baby there and you can kill it. The Church teaches, no, we don't kill innocent people. And the other is marriage. Marriage is only between a man and a woman. Left-wing ideology, you don't get to set the rules. Marriage is whatever anybody wants to make of it, including two men marrying each other. Now, in that case, you can say people want to innovate, they want to destroy. People want to conserve, they want to preserve.
Robert, during the opening ceremony of the General Assembly of the Italian Episcopal Conference that took place this week, the Pope asked bishops to pay more attention to the training of seminarians. He had this to say regarding rigid seminarians. Listen to this.
Abbiamo visto con frequenza seminaristi che sembravano buoni, ma rigidi, e la rigidità non è del buono spirito. E poi ci siamo accorti che dietro quella rigidità c'erano dei grossi problemi.
Now, this is not the first time Pope Francis has lamented rigid seminarians or priests. In 2019, in a meeting with Jesuits in Mozambique, he said of clericalism has a direct consequence in rigidity. Have you never seen young priests in stiff black cassocks and hats in the shape of the planet Saturn on their heads? Behind all the rigid clericalism, there are serious problems. Bob, who is he really addressing here when he speaks about seminarians and priests this way? And what do you think he means by rigidity?
Well, I've said this before in our other shows, but I really think this reflects some autobiographical element on his part. He has said that in the past, when he was a young priest himself and when he was the leader of the Jesuits in Argentina, that he was too authoritarian and maybe he was too rigid himself. And maybe he's overly sensitive to that. But I think any person looking around the universal church in the world at this moment in history, are there rigid seminarians? Yes, of course there are. There are rigid seminarians, we might also say, of the left as well as of the right, to go back to this idea of ideologies that he also was denouncing. But I think most of us, and I know a lot of recently ordained priests, I think that most of them I would know would probably be drawn from more traditional circles than than in general. And I can't say that I find that there's a kind of an unbalanced or a pathological rigidity there. I see a lot of that desire to preserve that Father Murray was talking about. There's no social advantage to being a priest in most places these days, at least in the developed world. So people who are going to become priests in Europe and the United States and Australia and other such countries, they do this because of their love of the gospel, their desire to preach the good news about Jesus Christ. I can't see that as rigidity. What I can see that is it's going to bring them into contact with the world, conflict with the world. But as Jesus himself said, the world has hated me, so it's going to hate you. He's warned people about this. True followers are going to find themselves in conflict with the world. So, look, if this is a worry of his because of his own autobiographical history, I understand that. It just doesn't seem to me to reflect very much the situation of the church in the world at this moment.
No, I agree with you. There's something biographical in it. It seems a holdover from some experience in Latin America that the Pope is trying to apply to the whole church. But, and this is a good tie-in, there are some reports in Italian media that during this Italian Episcopal Conference, Pope Francis announced plans to reform the worst of Benedict XVI's motu proprio Summorum Pontificum. Now, that touches on loosening up the regulations regarding celebration of the Latin Mass or the Mass in the extraordinary form. This was liberated by Benedict XVI. Father Jerry, what do you make of this news, and what would it mean to priests who want to say the Mass in the Roman form, in the extraordinary form?
Well, it's been verified, confirmed that the Pope did speak about these upcoming changes to Summorum Pontificum. Exactly what they will result in is not quite clear, but we know the usual complaint that has been coming into Rome, which is that bishops that don't like the old Mass, the Tridentine Mass, they're frustrated because through Summorum Pontificum, any priest, any pastor can celebrate that Mass at his own decision in his parish and invite the faithful to come. And as we've seen over the past number of years, this has been a very successful and fruitful pastoral move by Pope Benedict, because people that love the traditional Mass and they love the beauty of the Latin language and the solemnity, they're able to peacefully and joyfully pray, and it's resulted in a flourishing of vocation. I find it very ironic that, within a few weeks of the German priest blessing homosexual couples, the Pope, unfortunately, seems to have this idea that the real problems in the church are pathological conservative seminarians and people like the Latin Mass. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the Pope needs to broaden his vision. He may not like the old Mass, and that's fine. No one's asking him to say it. But please, let people who want to say the old Mass, the priests, and let the faithful want to hear it, let them come in peace. I mean, isn't that the kind of pastoral charity that the shepherds of the church should exercise?
Bob, according to reports, Pope Francis says that Benedict XVI liberalized the extraordinary form of the Mass only to satisfy Lefebvreites, people who had left the faith, because of the changes in Vatican II. Now, in Benedict's own words, he had this to say about his motu proprio in his book Last Testament: the rehabilitation of the ancient Mass with Summorum Pontificum must absolutely not be understood as a concession to the Society of St. Pius X, but as a way for the whole Church to be one with herself inwardly, with her own past, that what was previously holy in her is not somehow wrong now. It was certainly not as though there would now be another Mass. They are two different forms of one and the same rite. Your thoughts on this, and why would Francis suggest that Benedict wrote this to satisfy, the folks in St. Pius X?
Well, I think that that's a reflection of a lot of the people that he has around them. I think they probably regard that as a move within Europe to bring the Lefebvreites closer back to the church. But this Pope has tried to do that as well. He's also reached out to different factions in the church, to different segments in the church. Look, the fundamental thing here is this: that is the long-time liturgy of the universal church. And for me, I'm old enough to remember the Latin Mass. I grew up with it before I knew Latin myself. And people used to, we all have done this. You've got a missal that's got English on one side and Latin on the other side. So you can work your way through the Latin. What's the alternative when there are universal celebrations, let's say a canonization or a special event? The alternative is that's going to be in some vernacular language. And in Rome, that's probably going to mean Italian, which it's a nice language to learn. I myself have learned it, but it's not the case that universally, when you have large numbers of people coming from all over the world, they're going to know Italian. That Latin has been a source of unity, and it's one of those elements in the church that actually is not ideological, or does not have to be ideological. It doesn't have to be a going back. It can be a ressourcement. It can be a rediscovery of the sources that enable us to go forward in the church. So it seems to me that this is an element of unity, and the Pope has been looking for elements of unity. I think to characterize this as somehow a sectarian move is a mistake, and it could be very useful. We know that here in the United States, there's a lot of interest by young people in going to more traditional masses. And yeah. I think we let 100 flowers bloom and see where the Spirit is blowing at this point.
Yeah. Father Jerry, it has been announced Archbishop Arthur Roach will replace Cardinal Sarah as the prefect at the Vatican Congregation for Divine Worship and Discipline of the Sacraments. Now, Roach, it should be said, has a kind of negative view of the traditional Mass, the Tridentine Mass. In fact, he's written a solely clerical version of the liturgy, is how he characterizes it, in which the clergy alone are active and faithful are passive. Your thoughts on this appointment?
Well, he was the secretary, so he was the number 2 under Cardinal Sarah, so he certainly has experience now working in that department. It remains to be seen what he will do. We have 2 other officials who were appointed, a new secretary and a new undersecretary, so it's sort of a new lineup being put in there under Archbishop Roach. You know, the Latin Mass does not fall under the jurisdiction of the Congregation for Divine Worship. It falls under Ecclesia Dei Commission, which is part of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. So he will not have direct responsibility for it. I will say this, though, to characterize the participation of lay people in the Latin Mass as simply passive is to miss something profound, which is the movement of prayer in the soul and the action of the Holy Spirit through the whole sacramental action, the readings, the consecration, and the administration of the sacraments. It's not passive to enter into God's drama of grace renewed at the Mass. And I said the Latin Mass myself many times. Lay people do respond at some points. And really, one of the highest forms of participation is not talking, but listening, believing, and then nourishing your soul on what's going on. That is a profound participation. So I think it's a mistake to call it simply a passive participation. I
only have 5 minutes. Bob, I want to get you and Father's reaction to this. Father James Altman, the pastor of St. James the Less Parish in La Crosse, has been asked by his bishop, William Callahan, to resign. Now, Father Altman made a name for himself online with a rather explosive video that was distributed last year. He claimed that no Catholic could be a Democrat because of the party's leadership and its support of abortion. And in his parish bulletin, he wrote that COVID-19 vaccines are experimental, and he warned parishioners not to be guinea pigs. In his homily posted online this weekend, Father Altman had this to say when being asked to resign.
They want my head now for speaking that truth because I am divisive, as they like to say, or as the bishop himself has stated, I am ineffective as a pastor. So for the record, dear family, Bishop Callahan has asked me to resign as pastor as of this past Friday.
What do you make of what Father Altman said there, Robert?
Well, look, in a way, what we see in him is the anger that many people feel that our bishops don't seem to be taking seriously where the Democratic Party is leading the country. And it's especially painful because we have a president and a Speaker of the House who are Catholics and make a point of telling us that they're Catholics. They're leading us in a bad direction. And so I think the followers of Father Altman, when he made that first statement, now it's a rhetorical statement. Obviously, you can be a Catholic and a Democrat, and I wish there were more real Catholics who were Democrats. I wish that inside the party there are groups that are pro-life and pro-family. I wish there were a larger segment of them who were there. But just stating that as a kind of a rhetorical statement, it really put on the national consciousness, Catholic consciousness, the idea that there's something profoundly wrong, and so I understand that. Unfortunately, I think he's also gone off into some language that I wish he or any priest would just avoid. I mean, he's talked about abortionists as vermin, baby-killing vermin, and he's talked about pansy babies who are whining about what he says. I think this is unnecessary, that it actually diminishes the impact that he could have. And I think that some of his statements about the vaccines are, to my mind, a little bit, let's say, extreme. There are doubts to be had about the effectiveness of the vaccines. There are certainly moral questions to be raised, but he's talked about it altering your DNA, and there is really no scientific evidence. I've tried to look into this, and every time the argument is made.
And the CDC does say, this is an emergency.
Right.
It's really under their emergency request, and these are experimental vaccines in that sense, but they have been tested, and you have to just be careful about the way you characterize them.
So look, my take on this is he did some important things at the beginning. I think that he and everybody who wants to have a public voice in the United States should focus on those main things. And some of these other things that are more divisive, we can leave for some later debate. What we really need to focus on now are the things that our bishops should be talking about in June, and then again in the fall. And that is, we have to get clear that if we cannot make a strong statement about our commitment to life, family, all those issues that the modern world does not like, and apply them actively to people in high public positions in the United States, then I don't know what the church really says that's all that effective. We can talk about poverty, we can talk about refugees, we can talk about climate, but everybody's talking about that stuff.
Bob, I got to get Father in before I run out of time. This request for Father Altman's resignation comes in the same week we see Father Michael Pfleger reinstated in Chicago, and other priests making all kinds of wacky statements online, in public, at seminars. Why single this priest out, Father Jerry? And is there a danger here? And is this according to canon law? Can the bishop do this?
Well, the bishop can ask a pastor to resign. That is that's a request he can make, and if the pastor resigns, then it's there it is. If the bishop wants to transfer him to another parish, and the pastor does not volunteer to that transfer, then he has to undergo a canonical process in which the bishop has to state his reasons. So it is reasonable for the bishop to use canon law to transfer pastors. The broader issue is, why did it come to this point? We don't know the whole history of the dealings between Father Altman and his bishop, and I do agree with Bob and this, that some of these statements were imprudent and provocative and should not have been made. But without full knowledge of the total dealings between the two, it would be wrong to draw definitive conclusions that one is acting wrongly and the bishop acting wrongly, or that Father is defending himself in the way he should. Now, on the broader question, I'll just add this, Raymond. What's really on trial here in the United States right now in the Catholic Church is, do we represent Jesus Christ and his teaching, or do we represent another interest group seeking to get favors from the federal government? And it sounds awfully like the second, when we can't get our bishops to forthrightly tell the President of the United States, you cannot receive communion if you are paying for and praying for the abortion of children and doing everything you can to keep it legal. That is a total contradiction of your obligation as a Catholic. And that obligation, by the way, is not to me, to you, to any bishop. It's to Jesus Christ. That's what we should be talking about.
Gentlemen, we will leave it there. Thank you for the commentary, and you can find more of it, both Robert Royal and Father Jerry, at thecatholicthing.org. Thank you both.
Of the 171 Sandler O'Neill employees, 83 were in the South Tower. Only 17 made it out.
and your husband was just killed, what goes through your mind? The first thing that goes through your mind is your kids. The second thing is, how do I pay for it? So I said, okay, and I just tried to imagine. I said, all right, the first thing they're gonna worry about is cash flow. So bang, we're gonna pay them obviously through the end of the year, and we'll pay them bonuses that were greater than what they ever received. That's the short-term cash flow. Second thing they're gonna worry about is benefits. So with the help of our CFO, I figured out how long that we could really stand to do it, and then I doubled it, because I just did. And then was education. And we started a foundation, and that was going to pay for all the education for their kids. It matters a lot to me.
Because it's their dads, it's their people who...
And they're not there to fight for them.
Right, and you are.
Well, you got that right.
That was Jimmy Dunn, co-founder of Sandler O'Neill, an investment firm that was headquartered in the South Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11th. Armed with his faith and business acumen, he rebuilt his firm and the lives of the families who lost loved ones on that terrible day. He joins me tonight to talk about how his faith sustained him through this trial. He also made headlines recently for his commencement address at his beloved alma mater, the University of Notre Dame. Please welcome Vice Chair of Piper Sandler, Jimmy Dunn. Thanks for being with us, Jimmy. First off, my son graduated from Notre Dame last weekend, as you know, and your commencement speech was one of the most powerful I've ever heard. No filler, all lived experience, and I'm glad you're with us today. I want to start with what you did in the aftermath of 9/11. Your firm was devastated, your partners are gone, and you're on a golf course. What happened?
Well, you know, we had an unbelievable firm, and we had great partners, and we had an executive committee of Chris Quackenbush and Herman Sandler that were just incredible. And it was funny, not funny, but the day before, Herman said, whatever you do, don't call in the morning. We'll be fine. Chris will be here and I'll be here. And I was trying to qualify for the mid-amateur. I always called in and get involved in the trade and get distracted. So he was specific about not doing that. And so I actually didn't call in, which was very rare for me. And then I was on about the fourth hole, and a man came out and said, you had to call your office. He wasn't clear about what it was. And by the time we were driving back, he said a plane had hit the World Trade Center. I made the assumption it was a small plane. I couldn't envision what happened. And then I couldn't call the office, obviously, because the phones were not working. I called my house, and a friend was there, and she said, you know, a real plane, like a 747, and you better brace yourself, because I can't see how anybody in your firm survived. So that was the first news I got. And then actually 17 did get out, but many died.
Wow. Can you tell me what your immediate thoughts were, Jimmy, and how your faith influenced and informed your leadership in this? It had to be a maelstrom of grief you were going through as you quickly tried to piece all this together.
Well, I couldn't really understand it. You know, we in the United States 20 years ago, terrorism was something that happened over there. You know, I was raised in an Irish Catholic family, so I was very aware of the IRA and the conflicts in Northern Ireland, and obviously you know what would go on in the Middle East. But it was foreign to me mentally that something would happen on U.S. soil. The embassies excluded, obviously, and so it took me a little while to really understand it. And I remember early on when they had the early news coverage, they were talking about one of the pilots being a hero. And my thought was, well, if he's a hero, why didn't he go in the East River? You know, I couldn't even, the concept that someone would intentionally do this, it took me an hour or so before could get your hands around that. And then once I understood that it was intentional and it was terrorists, then I knew what was at stake, and I had a great education. I went to St. Joseph's Grammar School, St. John the Baptist High School, University of Notre Dame. My parents had a deep faith. My father, every night, I'd see him on, he hit his knees every night. My mother was a devout Catholic. My sisters would say, my father, you couldn't criticize his children or his faith. That's when you'd see his temper. So, and also we talked about the right types of people that stood up in the storm. I knew that all growing up. You know, he always had different leaders, whether it was Churchill or even football coaches like Lombardi. You
Right.
know, and so when this was going on, you know, I viewed it as, okay, anyone that ever did anything for me, anyone that was ever helped me, any teacher, any friend, any relative, the parents, you know, now it's my turn to show them that, you know, that they invested in the right guy. And I was going to do everything I possibly could and not worry about the consequence, which was candidly very easy. You know, people talk about that being difficult. Difficult is when you have a lot of different options and decisions. We didn't have any options. There wasn't any decision. It was basically do everything that we could, do the right thing, and do it every day till you died, till you were exhausted. And that's what we did for a long period of time. And fortunately, a lot of good things happened. And we had a lot of help.
Yeah. Jimmy, how did that day change you personally? And what you felt you had to do with the rest of your life? I mean, you had survived, my friend. You didn't make it to the office that day. You were out qualifying for your golf match.
Well, you know, it's interesting because years earlier, there was that other strike, Raymond, I don't know if you remember, but there was a U-Haul attack that went down in the basement of One World Trade Center. And the next day, the very next day of that day, our office manager, Leslie Richards, who survived, our CFO, May Della Pietro, who we all three of us survived both of them. She met at my apartment that next day of the first bomb. And she said, "You didn't go get your ID and your picture taken, did you?" And she said, "Well, you were scheduled to be at 12:15, the floor above where that bomb went off in 90, I guess it was when the first week we moved in there." So I had that experience of kind of missing it the first time. And then when the second one happened, it was just, it was, you know, devastating, but, you know, we had a job to do. We had to survive. And our plan was a simple one. You know, when there was a scholar was talking about what terrorists do and how they don't want to just kill people, they want to intimidate. And they want to use that intimidation to leverage. So it wasn't just a matter, they tried to kill. I mean, they bombed the building at 9 o'clock the Tuesday after Memorial Day. Everyone works the Tuesday after Memorial Day. And I would have thought most everyone was in the office at 9 o'clock. As it turns out, a lot of people were not. So they were trying to kill 60,000 people and killed thousands as it was. So I just established that whatever they would expect us to do, I would do the opposite. So they'd expect us to be afraid, I was going to be strong. They expect you to run, I was going to dig in. And we were going to find the people to do that with. And that's the key of this whole thing, is the people that came to our aid, our friends, people we didn't know, freedom people from all over the world that wanted to help. And so we didn't have any trouble getting out of bed to get to work in the morning.
So was there any question about what you had decided to do and what that Sandler O'Neill Assistance Fund continues to do for employees' families? I mean, there were 71 kids to educate. A lot of companies might have made the opposite decision, Jimmy.
Yeah, I don't care about that. I mean, we knew what we were going to do, all right? And we knew what the moment was all about. And what I had said early on at a partner meeting was, look, we're going to hear a lot of people say things that are nice about us. And we're going to, at this point in time, we're going to hear some tough things because people were distraught. You know, wives lost their husband. They couldn't explain it. They couldn't rationalize it. Why were they there? Why was I not there? You had a lot of that kind of guilt comment. So my point was, we're going to hear both sides of this equation. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to ignore it. And what we are going to do is think about someday our kids. I have 3 children, 2 graduated like your son at Notre Dame. But at that time, they were really young. This was 20 years ago. So they were 8 and 5. And my daughter was 3. And so my point was, someday they're going to meet somebody from 9/11 who lost it. And they're going to find out that their dad was Jimmy Dunn and their child and their dad died on 9/11. What that kid says to my kid about how we act, that's what I was going to worry about. And that's what we were all going to worry about. So, and that's why it was, you know, we with a lot of friends, we built the Assistance Foundation. We became profitable again. We paid benefits for 10 years, and we've done our job. But we did what we should do. You know, I never felt like we were doing anything extraordinary. Honestly, I still don't.
Well, but it's still an extraordinary example because, again, a lot of companies would not have made that decision, and certainly not in the moment. Now, I want to get to your commencement speech, but before I do, talk to me a bit about leadership. Where does leadership originate, Jimmy? Is it an ability to lead? Can it be taught? I know your father told you early, I read it in an interview, be a leader, not a follower, Jimmy, and he taught you to anticipate. How important is that?
Well, he didn't get a college education, but he knew the value of an education. And he was a tremendous father. You know, when we were young, we'd go at it. You know, I was dumb and I had what I call young person's disease, and, you know, I'm stupid. And, but so I argued with him a lot, and I was almost always wrong. But the reality was he had a lot of respect for people that stood up in the storm. And so that was inbred in me. He had a lot of respect for people that could say no. He had a lot of respect for a guy that would stick up for you when others were against you. So I had all those sort of things ingrained in me early on, and they're still right in me. And I would venture to say that my children have the same thing. They're all tough, you know, and they're you know, they can stand up to heat. And so there was this caddy culture. We were playing golf. Guys that could handle pressure. It was viewed as they were better. Guys that could think under pressure, whether it was gin rummy or golf. And so I had those things that were very, very important to me, which was not a normal upbringing. Usually you don't hear about, you know, I'd have a caddy that was 20 years older than me that was, you know, kid, you can play under the heat, you know, so I believed it. I believed I could perform better under pressure. I still believe I can perform better under pressure. So when this unbelievable pressure cooker of 9/11 occurred, I don't want this to sound wrong, Raymond, but I felt that I was uniquely qualified to do it. And that was the result of my father, my mother, my sisters, guys I caddied for. I don't know, you know, you know, I had a lot of, I loved Mandela. I loved Lincoln. I loved people like that. And that helped, I think.
Well, we're all called. I think we're all called to our moment, Jimmy, and life and God prepares you for that moment. And you were certainly and are a man of this moment and the present one. I want to give people a little taste of your commencement speech. Watch.
You'll be relieved to learn that I'm not here to lay out life's path for you. This won't be the gospel according to Jimmy Dunn. You'll choose your own way because that's part of life, figuring out things for yourself. All I can offer is some of my own experiences. They explain what we owe to this university and what anyone stands to gain from the lifetime gift of a Catholic education. Some of my experiences were pretty raw, and it is still difficult to talk about them. Forgive me, it's impossible for me to speak about 9/11 and my alma mater without getting emotional.
What did it mean to you to deliver that commencement address at your alma mater, Jimmy, particularly this year after 15 months of a pandemic and lockdown amid all this uncertainty?
Well, you know, Father John called me about it, and you know, I've talked to classes, I've done things, I've had different things like that. But, you know, Notre Dame football stadium, 20,000 people, it's a little different stage, you know, and and I'm more of a on your feet thinker. And you know, you can't give a commencement just completely on your feet. You can do a little bit of it. But so my instinct was, let me get Condi Rice or let me get Cardinal Dolan. And John was firm. He said, no, Jimmy, this year I need you to do this. So, you know, part of the great success of Notre Dame is Father John, because he's a gutty guy. I mean, I'm not sure I would have put me in front of people with no script. He didn't ask to see anything. He didn't know what I was going to talk about. Some of it, I don't know what I'm going to talk about before I say it. So he had a lot more. He and Jack Brennan were like committed that this was the right thing to do. And honestly, I tried to get out of it, not because I wasn't honored by it, not because I wish I couldn't do it. I was anxious about it. So obviously Notre Dame, you know, it means the world to me, and it was a great honor, and I'm really grateful the way it kind of worked out. So it was it was nerve-wracking.
Jimmy, before I let you go, as a trustee of Notre Dame, first of all, talk to me about the importance of what you call the gift of Catholic education, and how significant was the decision to reopen the campus this year when a great many colleges and universities are still virtual. I mean, I know for my son, it meant an enormous amount to go back to Notre Dame and be in person with his friends and his colleagues and teachers.
Well, you know, when I look, I'm a product of a Catholic education, so I can't speak to others, and I'm sure there are other faiths that all do all the great things too. I can only speak to a Catholic education, and character and empathy are really important themes in that education, and that was enormously helpful for me at 9/11. I was more afraid. You talk about, Raymond, well, some guys wouldn't have done this or some guys wouldn't have done that. I was more afraid of not doing it than doing it, because I knew what the right thing to do was. Now, it may have been hard, but it would have been a hell of a lot harder if I didn't do it, because then I knew that was wrong. So in that sense, I look right back to the value of from St. Joseph to St. John's to Notre Dame, the people I met. You know, that's what they strive to do. And that's why Catholic education for me is fundamental to my life. As far as our decision to go back, and I say our decision, I'm on the executive committee, but it was Father John and Jack Brennan. But Father John, he did something in COVID which most people didn't do. COVID was either a political, and this is my point of view, right? Not his, okay? But COVID was either a political weapon or a political bomb, depending on how you used it. There was never addressing what is it? Where are the real risks? What do we risk by closing down? Father John looked at it, the totality of it. He got great medical advice from the best people in the world. He understood a lot of the medical risks. Perfection, as I said, has left the building, but he understood that. He understood where the vulnerability was. And then he also understood the risk of us not educating. So here we believe, and I think I said it in the speech, that a great university, at least I believe, a great university, you learn more than they teach you. And that's very true at Notre Dame, through the residential life, the communities, all of the other things that were so invaluable to my upbringing. And John really felt that in-person education is incredibly important. And then there's the research side of it. So for us to simply say, ooh, this is risky, we better just shut down because it's politically safe, he was never going to accept that. It wasn't perfect. We had a lot of social distancing. Everybody was wearing masks. The football games were the same. But the reality of it is they had a benefit that a lot of other people did. And although they're young, I think they then appreciated the risk that Father John took. But he basically evaluated on what do we lose and what do we gain? And the notion of, but his ass would have been covered by simply saying we're shutting down, he was not willing to do that.
Jimmy, he, like you, made a gutty decision and the right one in the moment, and that's not always easy to do. I thank you for being here. It's an honor, and I hope we can do it again.
Thank you, Raymond. I really appreciate it. Best of luck to you.
Finally tonight, there's a brand new family film out on Netflix. It's called Blue Miracle. It's the true story of the Casa Hogar, an orphanage in Mexico, where its caretaker enters a fishing tournament as his last hope to keep from losing the orphanage. Through hope and perseverance and faith, they earn a miracle. Recently, I spoke to two of the film's stars, Jimmy Gonzalez and Hollywood legend Dennis Quaid. Take a look.
Dennis, Jimmy, great to see you both. Thank you for having me or for coming here. The movie is really all about fatherhood. And Dennis, your character, Captain Wade, he's estranged from his son. He has to win this tournament, which is at the center of the story. What do we need to know about fathers and sons today? And what of the film story attracted you?
Well, this is a story that is a true story. And if it had been a piece of fiction, there's no way I would have done it because it's too unbelievable
Right.
to be true, but it is. And, he's my character, Captain Wade, at the beginning, he's really is for fatherhood and all this other stuff. He's doing everything for the wrong reasons, basically. Mm-hmm. It's all based on his own ego. And he gets humbled. These orphans and that he has to take on, in order to enter this fishing tournament, they wind up teaching him a thing or two. And he's humbled by that. And that's when God's miracles start to work, is when one has humility and gets out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Jimmy, you initially did an audition for the role of Omar, who runs the orphanage at the center of this story. What drew you to this tale, and how did your own upbringing help inform your preparation for this role and the relationship between you and these children?
My story is very close to this story, and I don't think the director knew that before, even after he met me. He didn't know that part of my life till after I was cast, but it was just, synchronicity.
Yeah. Dennis, you seem attracted to these inspiring redemptive projects. I mean, The Rookie, A Dog's Purpose, Soul Surfer. I mean, I can keep going all the way back. What attracts you to these redemptive tales?
Well, there's enough Debbie Downer stories in this world.
I agree.
They have their place as well, but that's movies for me are to inspire. I think people go to the movies to begin with to feel things, not to see things or to hear facts or whatever. They want to feel, sometimes what they're not getting in life, or have hope that those kind of things can happen in their life, or they have happened in their life and they remember those things. And like I said, this story is just, it's such a wonderful, beautiful miracle. It's a miracle story.
Yeah. I want to talk about faith and prayer before I run out of time. They both figure prominently in this film.
You want to know what helps me when I'm having a hard time?
A nail?
This is just a nail. This is a miracle nail. Do you want to know how it works?
Okay.
Okay, so when I'm struggling with something, I write it down on a piece of paper, okay? And then I just take this nail and I hammer it up against the door, and pow! God hears me every time.
Jimmy, tell us about the nail, and then both of you on the importance of prayer in your own lives as well as in this project.
Yeah, the nail was, it's a representation, right, of something else, something out there, right, that keeps reminding you. And I thought that was just such a beautiful story, trope, if you will.
Dennis, what form and place does prayer have in your life, and how did it figure in this story?
Prayer is the way, to me, it's just basically talking to God. And it's, God gets lonely too, he wants us to talk to him. And it's, like with the nail, it's a way of manifesting from the inside to the outside what it is that you need or think you need, and what you can take out to remind yourself. But it's important, I think, every day to get in touch with God and in your life, have him in your life.
Well, I thank you both. The movie was beautiful. Our family watched it the other night together and they just loved it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It was a real gift.
All right, Raymond.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Blue Miracle, starring Dennis Quaid and Jimmy Gonzalez, is available on Netflix starting Thursday, May 27th. That's all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Cardinal George Pell will be here, as will Stephen Mosier. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.